farming is a tough one.
Yeah.
It's tough, and it's the one industry I think that we absolutely need. As you said, it's so great. Without farmers, what are we left with?
Hungry, sober, and naked.
Exactly.
Some people might like the naked part, but the hungry and sober part is not going to be fun, right?
Yeah, 1/3 of that is the burning now.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's not the hungry and sober part.
That's right.
All right, dude. Hello, Jeff. And so what's going on? What are we going to do with your hair?
It's summertime. Yeah, about to be summertime, so shorter it'd be better.
Just buzz it?
Oh, well, maybe not go like that.
Well, that's short.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of you in the summer, they just go, man,
Yeah,
not professional.
yeah, but if I like to be able to comb it over a little bit.
So fill me in. So you part your hair right over here. Does this have to change?
No, it's been like that for 40 years, so
Well, we're not changing it.
it probably will be hard to.
That's fine. That's fine. So, okay. So I just want to know, see, you part your hair over to the side. You get out of the shower, your hair's wet. What do you do? Do you put a product in? You put gel, pomade, hairspray, blow dry? Nothing.
Well, if I'm gonna be somewhere, if I'm not just around the house, I'll put a bit of gel and comb it.
Okay. And you do that when it's wet or damp?
Well, it's wet.
Why, it's stop being wet?
No, I towel dry.
Okay. The reason I ask is that's a very, very different thing. So that's easy to do. So and you put gel all over, or just kind of where you want that part to just be nice and
No, I just rub it all over, comb it.
okay. Hey, I don't want to overcomplicate it. You'd be surprised though. Over the years, I'll hear something that seems really straightforward, and then I'll start doing something. They go, no, that's not how I do. And then they start doing all this like maneuvering with the comb, and they go, "Do you have a hairdryer?" I mean, who said you did? Like, I want a hairdryer. Awesome.
Fairly simple. So
Hey, straightforward. I like that. Now, when was the last time you got your hair cut?
about 5 weeks. Oh, well, I got a trim before I went to DC 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
But so it's been about a month and a half.
So not too long ago. This is about the normal cadence of a haircut, right?
Right. I mean, because about once a month is usually what I do.
That's about what most of my guy clientele is like. We're people who have shorter hair. What do you have in store for me? What do you want to do for the summertime to take it short? Like, how much shorter do you want to go? Do you want to have it where in 2 weeks it ends up where you would normally get your hair cut, like not haircut, like where you would leave with your hair, and then you have like maybe you want to go longer in between the haircuts, perhaps? So use you another 2 weeks or so, or do you still want to maintain that shortness of length every 4 weeks?
Well, I probably going through the summer, I'm just going to keep it short.
Okay.
Shorter. So mainly if it'll come over on the top and in the sides, it can be, shorter. And I'm not so worried about that. I've got a big head.
Problem brains.
Yeah. Or a thick skull. So when it's shorter, it seems like my head looks bigger. So
So that's something we want to try to minimize?
it doesn't, I don't know. It's just, it's hot. So
It's just hot.
yeah. Like,
Functionality.
yeah, I'm more of a functional kind of guy. So.
That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm thinking. You have a little bit of wave. I'm seeing where this wave goes. I actually think it'd be really great to go through and cut your hair how it is right now, because this is how you've moved your hair. This is how it dries. This is how it normally probably falls in place. When your hair is wet, I can maneuver your hair all sorts of ways. It also becomes more elastic when it's wet. So it could get shorter potentially, right? Because I'm pulling it, and then that little bit of wave is going to snap back and recoil, and it's going to get a little bit shorter than maybe anticipated.
Right.
So I think the other thing is there's a phrase in haircutting that says, dry, don't lie, which means the length you see is the length you get.
Gotcha.
Let's do that. Let's start on the sides, get that nice, and I mean, I'm looking at it right now, and I'm thinking for sure everything that's kind of sticking out on my fingers is probably a good place to start. The one thing I probably would recommend is once we get this length dialed in, it would not be a bad idea to take it from here down and maybe make that just slightly a little bit more short, a little tighter, just because that seems to be the first area that grows out. And if you wear glasses or if you wear sunglasses, it starts to kick out a little bit. So that also just gives you a little bit more longevity right here around the ears.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Cool.
That'll work. I try to be easy. I tell the lady that does my hair, I said, she goes, well, how do you want it? I said, I'm just going to leave it to you. Just make me look good if you can with what you're working with.
You're easygoing, and you were easygoing to chat on the plane. For those of you who don't know, we met on a Southwest flight. Oh my gosh, my dogs are going bananas. Wow, these dogs, they see one animal and they go crazy.
Yeah, Tab and I met on a Southwest flight, and as you could tell, he's a talkative guy.
So are you.
So am I. So
Right now you're like a little clammed up. It was nice because you were really talkative, and you actually had what's the word I'm looking for? Once we got into the what do you do conversation, which is usually so what do you do? Oh, I do this. What do you do? Sometimes you hear like, oh, like when somebody goes, oh, I do something, and I'm like, oh, boring. Like it's just like, the bean counter of like the company. It's like boring stuff. But you do something really interesting. At least I find it interesting because one, I don't know enough about it. I know a little bit about this. Some clients over the years who had owned vineyards up in Northern California and Central Coast. And one of my friends, his dad is a farmer down in Florida. So I've gotten to know a little bit about farming, but you and I met right at the very beginning of the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
that's correct.
I had a lot of questions, which looking the way I look, you probably did think I probably had these questions.
Yeah.
I read a lot.
Yeah.
And we were talking a little bit about some of the effects of how that conflict would impact our farming system.
Right.
What is it exactly that you do? Because I know you're not a lobbyist. However, I walked away from that not knowing that you were not a lobbyist, but I'm like, oh, I bet he's like in that whole like backroom talking kind of thing.
I run an agricultural association. It's called South Texas Cotton and Grain Association. I work for cotton and grain farmers in, the southern half of Texas.
Is that south of Austin?
Yeah, it's kind of south of I-10 as you go across Texas. I don't cover the lower valley, but I've got 33 counties. It's roughly the size of Indiana because everything in Texas is big. And I consider myself to run a small association. In terms of the size of cotton production, Texas is the largest cotton producing state in the U.S.
Really?
Somewhere between 40 and 50% of the cotton in the U.S. is produced in Texas. Most of that is in the High Plains area, around Lubbock and Amarillo, and south of Amarillo, but out in the Lubbock area. My area would be the second largest in terms of production because Texas is big and we've got so many acres. It kind of gets masked, when you're part of a big state. But if I was my own state, or if my association territory was its own state, we'd be the third largest cotton producing state in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
I think of myself as small. In terms of production, we're fairly large. Also, I'm a one-man shop. And I have been for 23 and a half of the 25 years I've worked here.
So you're like the quintessential small business owner.
Pretty much, except that I am like a small business owner, except I don't own it because as a nonprofit, so I don't own the business, but it's a lot like working and having a small business because I make all the decisions. I'm fairly autonomous in what I do, which you have to be self-motivated if you're going to be effective and stay on top of things.
Yeah.
But I do everything from check the mail and open envelopes and pay the bills and all the way up to, kind of what I call lobby or advocacy type work where I'm going to either Washington or Austin and meeting with policymakers and decision makers and making those things happen.
I like to use the word advocacy because I think that the word lobbyist is so tainted.
Which is unfortunate because I was actually at a meeting before I came here. One of my friends retired, and he put a lot of effort into improving the image, and he was unabashed about being a lobbyist. He said, it's like anything where you have a small number of people that kind of give it a bad image. But in all honesty, the job of lobbyists is to educate as much as anything. And and advocacy, same thing, is to educate the people that are making decisions. I don't control the decisions they make, and there's no way I can. You just hope that you provide enough information that they can make an informed decision and that truth is on your side. And a lot of these issues, when you understand what the issue is or what's going on, and say, oh, I get it. This is why we need this. And so that's really when we're doing that kind of work, what's what we're trying to do is educate people.
How many years have you been doing this?
25. This is my 25th year.
Like, how did you get into this? This, by the way, starting an association that was to do this does not seem like one of the things that they talk about at career day with your counselor at high school. They're like, oh, by the way, you could, go into medical, you can go into law, you can become a teacher, you can become an accountant, you can start an advocacy group for farmers.
Right.
How did one fall into this?
I started after college, I worked for a ag lender in the farm credit system.
Okay. What is that?
It's a lot like a commercial bank, except that it's a cooperative based.
Okay.
So it's owned by the borrowers own the bank essentially. And the farm credit system is actually very big. So it's got regional banks across the U.S. and they fund themselves through selling bonds in the bond market. So it's a little different system, but the profits of the co-op or the lending institution go back to the borrower. So in a cooperative sense, that's the way it operates. Anyway, so I worked for about 5 years in farm credit.
Okay.
And the drought of 96, I tell people the drought of 1996 cost me my job because we lost a lot of loan volume. The office I was in had mainly cattle loans. Mm-hmm. And when it's dry, you sell the herd sold, and they didn't need a junior loan officer in a little office anymore. President of our association, because those are associations too, he called me and said, okay. And I said, I've been waiting for your call because I was expecting it. He said, I just dreaded having to make this call. I said, well, I've kind of been expecting it, Jimmy. He said, well, there's this company that's in Austin that's working on financial analysis software, and they need somebody that can kind of be a go-between between the computer people and the loan officers and stuff that work in these credit associations. And I told them that you were the perfect person for this, and they're expecting your call. And so I left December 31 from my job, and I started January 2nd with a little software development company in Austin, working on financial analysis software. I did that about a year and a half, and then this position came open. My dad called me and said, hey, there's a position, and I think you should come check it out. The executive director that had run the association had moved to, he'd left and gone to a different position.
What association are we talking?
This is South Texas Cotton and Grain, where I work. Yeah. Sorry, I probably should have used that.
That was nice. Hey, look, I'm listening as much as I am listening. I'm also trying not to give a bad haircut. So if I'm saying something, I'm just making sure that I am my active yet passive listening. It's following the story.
I told my wife, I said, you sure you can do that? Because I was so introverted and I hated to be in front of people.
I can't even imagine you being introverted.
Yeah. And I said, well, the only way you get better at something is if you just do it. And she's like, all right, if you think you can do it. And so I walked in, and I had a secretary which was fortunate. She had been there most of the time that the association had been in existence.
Which is how long, by the way?
They formed it in 1963, and she started in 1964 or 5. And so
as old as my car.
Yeah, right? She was 77, 78, and she needed to retire, but she had so much institutional knowledge that I kept her on for not quite a year. And she did not want to retire, and I think it was just habit. So she cried when I told her that she needed to retire. But I saw her a month later. I went to light the pilot lighter on her heater at her house, and to help her out. And she said, I have been so busy, I don't know what I was doing before. And she was much happier. And she didn't realize that she was just bored to death, sitting in an office with nothing to do. And when she could go, live life. But since then, I work by myself in the association, which has its challenges. I tell people that a lot of times I lobby other organizations to build coalitions as much as I lobby decision makers, because being a small associate, a small group, and the only way a lot of times I can get stuff done is to, strengthen numbers.
I'm pretty sure farming, like all things, has its good years and bad years, right?
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure those bad years are out of our control most of the time because it's due to weather.
Yeah, that's the thing that we have to explain to people. One of my farmers explains it really well. He goes, okay, what's the formula for revenue in a business? It's price times quantity, right?
Yeah.
Price times quantity equals revenue. And he says, okay, do I have any control over the price? No. Well, because farmers don't set their price. It's set, it's set in global markets. Do I have any control over my yield? To a certain extent, but not really. If the weather goes against you, you don't have any control. He said, so what control over my income do I have? None, right? That's the part that makes farming very challenging. Plus the fact that it's so expensive to farm. The amount of capital that it requires just for put a crop in and take it to harvest. It boggles my mind sometimes the amount of money that it takes to do that. The capital investment you have to have in equipment to be able to farm.
Yeah,
those numbers are big too. I'll give you a perfect example. I'm gonna give you a perfect example.
Yeah,
we were coming back from College Station. We'd gone up to, I think, to speak to one of the college classes there to kind of give them some exposure to agriculture. And so I'm sitting in the back seat, and two of my farmers are in the front seat, and they're on the phone with their equipment salesman, trying to negotiate and decide on buying cotton pickers. The cotton picker is the machine that harvests the cotton.
Got it.
They're unbelievably expensive.
What are we talking about?
Well, right now, a new one is just over $1 million.
Okay.
For one machine. And these, at the time, they were the machines that this was a couple of years ago, so they were $800,000. It was about the price that they were looking at. And so the conversation was, well, we get one that's a year old, and it's $80,000. No, it was $90,000 less for a 1-year-old machine. Yeah. And they're like, well, man, it's only $90,000. Maybe I'll just buy new ones. And I was sitting in the back, I'm thinking, they're going to buy 3 of these. So they're talking about $270,000 difference. But the numbers that they're dealing with are so big that they get, I guess, a little bit desensitized to
$90,000 difference.
Yeah. And I'm thinking $90,000 is a lot of money.
Because my uncle's a truck driver. So he's always telling me about the cost of the trucks. And, he's a truck driver out in California.
Right.
And California has very different emission laws. And usually what they do kind of sets the tone.
That's correct.
When it comes to environmental impact across the nation. But these trucks don't last that long by California standards. So they buy a truck for $250,000, whatever. It can only run for, I don't know the time span, but he says right when you're about to break even on owning the truck, you have to get rid of it. Not because it doesn't run, but because now the emissions of California deem it undrivable.
Or it could be with my farmers, because we have emissions stuff we have Tier 4 engines on tractors now.
Yeah.
And so you really worry about that thing going off of warranty, because when it comes off of warranty, repairing that piece of equipment can just get outrageously costly. And that's probably what your uncle is running into.
Also, they sell it. What happens is the other states who don't have the emission laws buy these trucks for pennies on the dollar, and they get to drive for another 10 years.
Oh.
And so I didn't know if the lifespan of these is you buy a $1 million cotton picker and you're going to have that for 5 or 6 years.
This has been going on for long enough that I'm wondering when this is going to run out. What I see a lot of times is the farmers will buy that piece of equipment, they'll run it 1 year and they sell it.
Really?
And then they order the ones for the next year. But what's slowed that down is the supply chain issues since COVID and all of those issues that played into it. There's not a lot of certainty on whether or not you'll get the new machine when you need it. Farmers have been holding some of that equipment until the new stuff is available. The guys that tend to operate newer equipment where it's in warranty have been holding equipment a little longer because of that.
I'm wondering if they're taking better care of these machines.
I think most of the time they're pretty well kept. Yeah, because they keep them stored inside and they keep those clean. And
I just know people who lease cars that they just destroy.
No, it's not so much.
They look at a penalty of whatever, and I get a new car. And I'm like, man, for somebody who loves cars, there's a respect issue. All machines,
right?
When you're talking to these college kids, what is it that you're trying to expose them to?
The class that we go teach, and I've got a friend that teaches at A&M, and it's senior level foreign policy class.
By the way, I might want that person's phone.
He's even surlier and harder to get along with than I am. So I don't know, but
You're so easy to go, you know.
but
I'm guessing sarcasm now. This is
no, he's kind of surly, but
yeah.
all right. I hope he sees this so he knows I'm talking about it, but it makes it more real for the students. We go talk early in the class so that they understand the risks involved and the money that's involved in agriculture. And most people don't realize it. And even I have a hard time sometimes wrapping my head around how much money it costs. But
What are these numbers?
what I would consider a small farm, say 1,000 acres, which is enough that if you were...
What does 1,000 acres produce? And are we talking in 1,000 acres? Like, is it something that we could go through and take these 1,000 acres that are not in cotton and put it into like a food equation where like 1,000 acres of bananas or 1,000 acres of potatoes? Like what would that potentially yield to a population?
Well, you have to understand the way our farm programs work in the U.S. And so we're set up where we subsidize commodity crops. So think of the major commodities: wheat, corn, soybeans, cotton, rice. I don't know if there's so many planting prohibitions on there, but for a long time there were prohibitions on planting specialty crops on those acres. What that did is that protected the folks that raised specialty crops, right? Because if one of my guys took 500 acres and devoted to whatever, strawberries, say gourds, strawberries, whatever, I could totally wreck the market, right?
Sounds like because fixing.
It's how you basically underpin agriculture in the U.S. And spend the least amount of money doing it. It's kind of the way it's kind of the way we have to do it. So, and if you think about the system, if you plug the money in there and you keep those commodity farmer, the major commodities viable.
Yeah.
Well, that keeps that land in those major commodities, and it keeps them from competing with some of the specialty crops. What ends up happening. My friend that's a farm policy guy may disagree with me on that. But before we had formal farm policy, what farmers would end up doing is chasing the highest price of whatever it was. In my county, they used to grow sugar cane and cabbage and all kinds of things. But whatever happened to be the popular thing of the day, if you're looking in the rearview mirror, deciding what you're going to plant for next year, you're almost always going to be chasing the market. Yeah, you've already missed the market.
I mean, because I know it takes a lot of money to run a farm.
Yeah.
But I don't think, I consider myself super, I call, what's the term? They call people normies, right? Like I'm a super normie. I'm like Nick Normal.
Right.
When it comes to this, I don't know, but I know that it costs a lot of money. And I'm curious to how much it costs because I imagine that these numbers are going to be just like my jaw's going to be on the floor.
Used to, I would think that 1,000 acre farm that they could get by with a $500,000 operating loan. So $500,000 to put their crop in and take it to harvest. I think now, if you farmed 1,000 to 1,500 acres, you're going to need an operating note. That's just your operation stuff of $1 million to $1.5 million, probably $1 million plus. And that doesn't take care of your equipment. So you have to have equipment to go along with that. In my area, 1,000 acre farm would be relatively small. As you get closer to Houston, where it's a little more urbanized, those farms are smaller.
Okay.
And so an average farm up there would be, 1,500 to 3,000 acres. As you go south in my territory into the Corpus area, where there's not as much urbanization and the land isn't as productive, so the farms are bigger. And so down there, kind of a normal size farm is going to be in 5,000 to 10,000 acres.
And when you say not as productive, you're talking about the ground is not as fertile?
Well, it's drier. It doesn't rain as much. And so rain makes grain, rain makes crops. The farms are family farms. Some of them are organized as corporations to manage liability, But say my biggest farm is probably 30 to 40,000 acres.
Whoa, that's big.
Yeah. And then, I think of a 5,000 to 10,000 acre farm is kind of the norm now.
That's like your average.
Yeah. A 5,000 acre farm is going to need $2.5 to $3 million in operating money.
And that's with machine loans as well.
The machine loans will be on top of that.
Okay. So we're talking,
So you'd have to have
5 million,
maybe plus a little above.
give or take.
Yeah.
Give or take 100 500,000. I mean, well, I feel like we're talking about it's like 90,000.
Yeah.
I feel like it's $500,000.
When you think about a 5,000 acre farm, one cotton picker is not enough to harvest.
How many do you need for 5,000 acres?
Probably 2. What my friends do is they share equipment or they harvest together. So they buy 3 machines and they're usually harvesting probably, it's probably close to 5,000 acres. And that's what they.
So they're pulling their money together to buy these.
Well,
these
one will buy 2 and one will buy 1, and then I don't know if they flipped it and switched it.
Get them out like the Le Mans of cotton picking, 24 hours. Just
and what's crazy is because you know what economies of scale are, so you have to.
I don't, so I'd like you to explain.
Okay, I sit on this panel where they build with my friend that's the economist at A&M.
Yeah,
and so one of the things that they do is they have what they call representative farms, so they're scattered across the country. And they get a producer panel to meet with the economist. And they say, okay, what do you think is a normal size farm for this area? And so they say, it's 5,000 acres. Okay. So how much would you spend to plant your corn? How much would you spend to plant cotton and whatever your crops are?
Yeah.
What equipment would you need? And they take all that and they build, it's not anybody's individual farm, but it's kind of representative of the area. I sit on these panels that are in my area. So south of the Nueces River, that farm it's gotten bigger because it started off as like a 6,000 acre farm a few years ago. And now it's gotten to, I think it's about 11,000 acre row crop farm that is split generally between about half cotton and half grain crops. You go just north of there and the kind of representative farm is about a 7,000 acre farm. The problem is the guy that has the 7,000 acre farm has to have almost the same amount of equipment as the guy that's got the 10,000 acre farm. So his equipment cost per acre is more. The guy with the bigger farm is capturing economies of scale because as he scales up, it lowers his fixed cost on a per acre basis.
Okay.
And so that's the way it works is you have certain fixed costs that no matter what you do, you're going to have to pay that cost. And so the more acres you can spread those over, the cheaper it gets. Well, you talk about a 10,000 acre farm.
Yeah.
And say it costs you $700, maybe more than that. With inflation, it's probably $900 an acre. That's $9 million, right?
Yeah. A lot of money.
That's a lot of money to borrow. And then you have to buy the equipment too. And most of these guys, their equipment complement's probably in that $4 to $5 million range. And I may be selling that short, but I have to ask them every once in a while, what's a new tractor cost? I used to think it was $1,000 a horsepower. So a 250 horsepower tractor would be $250,000. And they're like, no, you can't buy one for that anymore. Now tractors are like $400,000 for a tractor that's big enough to be, usable on a farm that size. Combines are pushing $1 million. Cotton pickers are over $1 million. It's just amazing how much capital it takes. And, they borrow that operating money, plant the seed, and pray that they're going to get I keep tilting my head.
No, you're fine. No, every now and then I just like to go do a check-in and make sure that we're running it nice and lean. So I'm not rounding anything out. So that way it's just like really nice and yeah. No, you're doing fine.
Okay.
You're doing great, man.
Fortunately, we have ways we can mitigate some of that risk, weather and stuff. We have insurance, crop insurance. It doesn't operate the same as your insurance on your car or your house. So if you were going to insure your car, you would insure it for the value of replacement less a deductible, right?
Yeah.
And you set $1,000 or whatever you want your deductible to be. But it's based on kind of the current value of the vehicle.
Yeah.
The way crop insurance works is the deductible is much higher. So most of my guys have a 30% deductible. You don't insure the value of the crop, you insure an average yield. So you take a 10-year average of your yields and you would insure 70% of that. For this year, where we've had inflation, you hear on the news, we've had 8% inflation or so in the general economy.
Yeah.
Farmers over the last 2 years their inflation's been about 50%.
Okay.
So those costs have really skyrocketed. In fertilizer, which we had talked about on our plane ride, right?
Yeah. afterwards, because you gave me your card when you were leaving, and I was so excited. Yeah. And I think I waited like a couple of weeks, and I was like, oh my, I had a lot going on. I'm like, all right, I got to email him because I don't want this guy I don't want to forget I have his card. I don't want to email him going like, ooh, what guy? You know, well, the random guy, the other guy from California who's now moved to Austin, like everyone else. I think it was interesting because you always hear that inflation is only 8% or something like that. I'm not an economist, and I would love to talk to somebody about that. I've heard friends, clients who own businesses saying that it's not exactly 8%. Yeah. When you figure that some of the cost of goods are 12%, 15%. And then somebody else told me that the measuring of inflation now, that's changed.
Yeah, if you compared inflation rate today with like in the 80s when it would be
like how they measured it. It was,
if we use the same formula
or something like that.
That's right.
Which actually feels more appropriate.
Right.
When I'm like, I bought the same bag of trail mix from HEB, right? Now, I don't have a long history of buying trail mix. No, hang on. But like since when I moved to Austin in the beginning of February 2020, I remember it cost like $6.38 for this bag of trail mix. Last night, I was at HEB, and it is now $10.
Yeah.
That does not feel like an 8% jump.
That's right. You know, fertilizer prices just went bananas after the Ukraine deal because there's three components. There's nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium. So the P and K, a lot of that comes from overseas. I guess the nitrogen could too, but those prices just went bananas. They've come down a little bit, but they're still much, much higher than they were. Mm-hmm. Fuel got expensive. You know, remember when diesel got to over $5 a gallon? Mm-hmm. And imagine running one of those tractors.
You gave me an example of how much they run in an hour.
Well, they've got like a 300-gallon tank, and they fill that at least once a day. Big cotton pickers because they burn a lot of fuel, so they probably burn, $500-600 gallons a day. That's $3,000 a day in fuel. Tractors, and farm equipment. I think it went up 15+% year over year.
Okay.
For a tractor, when you're talking about something that's $500,000 to start.
15%
is a lot. The one that a lot of people don't think about is interest rates, because interest rates have doubled. You know, that's a recent phenomenon. Interest rates have gone up. And so you think about the impact of doubling interest rates when you're in a capital or intensive business where you have to borrow a lot of money. So if you're borrowing $9 million or $1 million, but keep it easy, $1 million, and your interest rate doubles.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference. That's troubling for a lot of my farmers.
I remember reading at one point, like 100 years ago, that we used to have like way more farmers.
Right.
And now we have less farmers. And then I feel this is also like a younger generation of individuals who want to start like homesteading. That's been like a buzzword. Do you think there's going to be a generation who's going to go look at farming and go, you know what, we need more of this, and more people are going to be going away from jobs that required more screen uses, especially with like AI coming on, where they're going to like, look, AI is not going to be able to replace me, the farmer.
Right. During the pandemic, a lot of people became gardeners, and, I think there was a lot of interest in that and kind of growing your own food. And that's gone on for a while, where people want to, maybe as gardens, they want to grow their stuff organically and things, but, and that's fine. I think that's actually a good thing for those kind of operations to do that. When you think about commercial agriculture, full scale, big ag, there's 10% of producers or farmers in the U.S. provide 80 to 90% of the production. That's kind of what troubles me, is how we replace and recruit people to be farmers to take the place of those 10% that are doing it. Because the barrier to entry is pretty steep. You got to have to be able to go out and borrow $1 million, and that's a small farm that will barely pay you a living. Right? You're going to do a lot of work. You may have to have a job in town, and do that as a side. If you're farming 1,000 acres, you're probably going to have some outside income to be able to feed your family. So that's a challenge. The other thing is, And we run into this all the time where economics is telling producers that they need to be bigger to capture economies of scale. But then at the same time, they get beat up for it well, you're just big farmers. Even our Secretary of Ag has made the comment that, we need to pay more attention to the small farmers. And it's frustrating for the guys that are part of that 10% that are feeding the nation and feeding the world and thinking, we need the help too. And don't forget about us. Actually need those tools probably better than the really small farmers. The folks that are having gardens, if you've got a garden, you don't need any government support, right?
No.
You're going to be fine. And really, once you get beyond that, the program operates the same for everybody in terms of it pays per acre. They're acreage-based programs generally, or production-based. So what you receive on your production will be the same as everybody else. It always worries me whenever they start trying to figure out or trying to limit benefits because you're a big farmer. It's like, if we're paying on production or we're paying on acres, well, why not just treat all the acres the same, regardless of your size? But it is what it is. I do worry about who's going to farm the land when this generation of farmers retires.
What is the average age of your farm?
I've heard that number changes. It's always been in like the late 50s. I would say probably the average age isn't that 60.
Really?
Yeah. So think about that. These guys are in their 60s and so they're looking for an exit strategy, and so they'd like to find somebody to come take over.
Yeah,
there's a smaller number of farmers that are going to take over that business.
Yeah,
that tells you that farms are even going to have to get bigger, right? One guy's going to have to farm more. If somebody comes in and two farmers retire, there's only one guy that's left to farm, and farms could get much bigger.
I remember reading something that a lot of I'm going to put farmers in the category of skilled labor jobs. Skilled labor being plumbers, electricians, masonries. Over time, their skill set of what they do has actually become more honed, more sharp, right? And more knowledgeable more knowledge has been gained during their time of that. And there's just not a lot of these people left. And at the average age of like some of these professions is that they're already start to retire. And this younger generation, maybe they looked at, look, my dad's an electrician, he's with the union. I remember hearing about my dad, and seeing, what he would have to do. And I was like, I do not want to do that physical labor.
Right.
I get it. But at the same time, now that these jobs, because there's so few, in the neighborhood I live in, some people who wanted to get landscaping done, or they wanted to get something built in their home, they were on a wait list for 9 months.
And it's going to be really expensive when it's done too.
Well, I remember when lumber was I was joking around, I'm like, it's like $99 an ounce. Yeah. I was like, you're not going to even measure by the length. It's like, we're just going to measure wood by the ounce. I just wonder if there is going to be this generation where look, all the problems that are now going to accumulate, like when the chickens come home to roost, right? These things have been set in stone for a while.
And I think part of that in Texas, I know when it happened in Texas, Ross Perot was, when he ran for governor, and he had a big push that everybody goes to college. And, he thought that was important. And that's a lofty goal. I think that we may have done a disservice when we try to tell students that everybody needs to go to college to be successful, because there's a lot of opportunity for people to go into trades and have skills that don't require college, and they don't require going into debt to get that. You could get a certification or certificate of some kind and go to work and be an apprentice and have a career and have a very comfortable life. And I think we're coming to that realization. Mike Rowe has done a great job as being
Mike Rowe?
Yeah.
Oh, that guy? Yeah. Oh, I love dirty jobs. I don't know what he's doing right now.
Well, but he's been a big advocate of pushing for the trades, working in the trades and having, exactly.
I'm a huge fan of him.
Right. Because that's what, you do too. You work in the trades, right?
You know what's interesting about the trades? And I hope I hope AI brings more light to trades. Really hard, particularly with trades, to do AI. We're not there with robotics yet.
That's right.
And the other thing is, I remember seeing a lot of my friends major in computer science, and then right when they graduated high school and they were going into college, they started was an incentive for corporations to offload their tech department outside of the U.S. offshore, right? And I just remember looking around at everybody like, good luck trying to do that to a hairdresser.
Yeah, that's right.
So like, good luck offshoring and good luck with AI. And I think there's more younger individuals are looking and going like, wow, college is not the answer.
Yeah.
I personally felt like college was not the answer for me.
Yeah.
I was like, cool. So you're going to give me a piece of paper for things. I'm going to walk into college. I'm going to come out of college knowing, especially being an art major, the most subjective thing of all time. Like if I want to become like, I don't know, a surgeon, that makes sense to go to school. But like with art, it's like, it didn't seem like it just seemed like something like you either have it or you don't.
That's right.
That's kind of how I feel. And people will disagree with me on that. And that's fine. Yeah. I feel like it's like with athleticism. You either
that's right.
have this or you don't, or you have something that you can work on. You get to a certain point. I think Tony Hawk's a really good example of like on face value, not having this great athleticism, but because of his determination and some of his limited abilities with his strength, he figured out a way to make the skateboard work for him and he changed the face of the game. And there's few people who are Tony Hawk that change something because their physical strengths will limit them. But in every other sport, your physical strength pretty much determines your greatness.
That's right.
And I felt like arts, either you're creative, or you
either have it or you don't. That's some things are
that's right. It's like singers.
Yeah. I studied agricultural economics at Texas A&M, and so I think.
So you think we're all pros to blame? Well, I know it's a lot.
I think that was in the late 80s, maybe, or mid to late 80s. So it was after I got out of high school. So I graduated a long time ago, 84, from high school.
I was 2.
Yeah. See? Just stop that.
I graduated high school in 2000, right? So I remember even leading to there, I had one English teacher. She had every amazing Ivy League pennant all around her whole classroom. And she made everyone go around and tell everybody which college they wanted to go to, what they wanted to major in, because she believed college was the answer. And for her, she has every reason to believe that because it worked for her.
That's right.
And if something works for you, you believe the system that led you to that.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work for you, you're like, that's a scam.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for everybody.
When you realize that, everybody's different, I wouldn't say belittled, but it just kind of discounted the value of trade, the trade bit, working in the trades.
You know what?
Because like you're very successful doing what you do, right? Obviously you are, and and you work in the trades. And I know a lot of people that the plumbers, AC people that.
By the way, they're using geometry and math.
And they make more money than I do running a little nonprofit association.
It's the amount of
and most of them become small business people, and they have a business and that grows over time. And
look, I'm in my 40s, but I'm hoping that like the next generation, maybe like I would love if my son, my oldest, showed an interest, or even my youngest son showed an interest in some sort of trade. And I know this sounds crazy that I'd hope that they would do that. I just look at all my friends and colleagues. I look at all of my clients over the years. I look at, friends. And I look at all the things that are happening right now. And I just keep going back to like, as much as technology advances, it's always going to exclude the skilled labor community.
Right.
No matter what happens in the world, I just remember always saying like, the jobs that everyone picked, and funny enough, the hairdresser was one of them during the recession. They're like recession-proof, depression-proof jobs. Like people are still going to need electricity. They're still going to get things fixed. Somebody's going to have to go through and get a toilet. Maybe people aren't going through and doing landscaping. I understand that. The first once-in-a-lifetime financial collapse, I feel like I've lived through a few of those now, in the 07 thing is yeah, I had people who had lost their jobs, and I had lost them as clients for a little while because of their job. But I also had them coming to me because they're going for job interviews. It was strange.
Yeah.
They had to look professional, so they had to get their hair cut.
Yeah.
So even though like maybe I didn't see them as frequently, I still saw them, and I was still somewhat.
You were still busy.
I was still busy. I remember that year, my friends were losing all their jobs. One of my buddies at Deloitte got laid off, and they're all like trying to figure out how they're going to like manage the payment, their pension. And I'm like, see you in 2 weeks. I'm going to Hawaii.
Yeah.
You know, times are good. And I'm not like bragging, but I just remember seeing those instances going like, lucky me to pick a job or a career path that wasn't going to be affected so much. And I always hear people say like, oh, we should stop subsidizing the farmers.
Yeah.
And,
well,
and I'm just wondering. Hang on.
Okay.
No. You're like
You're just no. I'm gonna wait.
No. I'm wondering if that position that gains a lot of popularity with people, and I say people like the individuals who believe that, if it's coming from a not fully informed reason of how we got there and why we continue to do it.
Right.
That's always been my assumption. Am I wrong in thinking that? Am I being too generous?
I think that's right. If you want more of something, you subsidize it, right?
Yeah.
And so we've been very fortunate in our country that we've never run out of food. The pandemic was probably the closest we ever had of seeing grocery store shelves empty because of supply chain issues. And, they rippled through farm country too, particularly livestock producers and stuff that they struggled through that. But by and large, our country, we've never been hungry here, right? And so it's easy to discount the value of agriculture and food security. I always tell people, I work for farmers because I can't grow anything. I don't have that skill, right? It's like art. You either have it or you don't. I don't. So I work for the guys that do. But I tell them, guys like me, where I'm relying on y'all to grow food for me, I can't risk us letting the system fail just to prove the point, right? We can't say, we're not gonna have a farm support program in the U.S. We're just gonna let farmers go it alone and see what happens. And let's prove our point of how valuable we are
through destruction.
Yeah, I can't. I don't want to be hungry. I mean, I'm a big guy. I have to eat a lot of food, right? So
you can always eat as a bug.
Yeah, I see the value in it, and fortunately, when we're in Washington and talking to the folks that make the decisions, it's a lot smaller audience that we talk to because there's 535 of them that we have to visit with, and we only need over half to get stuff passed, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of those people understand it, and I think especially if they have any military experience, like a lot of the representatives have military experience.
Yeah.
They understand the strategic value of food in your country. After all the supply chain issues, there's a sudden resurgence in interest in bringing stuff back onshore. Production capacity here instead of somewhere else. Because, man, if you have a ripple in the supply chain, what happens? Well, you go without. Okay, if I order a vehicle, a new car, and it can't be here for 8 months, I can drive my old one for 8 months. But whenever you start talking about things like food, you can't just put off not eating for a week. Or 8 months or till the next harvest. I think as much as anything, that help focus people on the importance of having a strong and vibrant domestic ag sector. It's looking good.
Oh, glad.
Man, you're pretty good at this.
I know this is our first.
And you're talking too, which I couldn't do that. I've got to do one thing at a time.
Well, you learn how to, cut, and then you learn how to
stop. Yeah.
And then the talking thing happens, like riding a bike,
Yeah.
Eventually you're jumping off curbs and, all sorts of stuff. Does it ever get included into like a national security budget to secure, like I've had these abstract ideas of what national security could be, right? And having clients who've worked in many administrations and working in different capacities of government from local to state and federal, I've always had this very abstract idea of like what could be considered national security, right? And one of those things is food security,
right?
Like you want your your country to be secure. And to me, food would fall under that. Like that should be a high priority.
It's one of the primary, I mean, it's hierarchy of needs is the top one.
Food and shelter.
Yeah. It's number one, right? You gotta eat or you're not gonna make it. It's generally not rolled into,
So part of that?
yeah, but I mean, we make that argument and I think people, I think they understand it. They get it, that it's important to have that. As there's less and less farmers, we've gotten further away from the farm. If you went back 100 years ago, everybody knew who a farmer was because they had a cousin or an uncle or dad, or they came from the farm, or so there were a lot closer ties. In the College of Agriculture, when I'm there, I usually ask a show of hands in a classroom of 250 students. I said, okay, how many of y'all come from a farm? And it's less than 5%.
Really?
Yeah, it's a small number. And this is in the College of Agriculture, right, at Texas A&M.
I'm curious, like with the people who those that 95% who do not come from a farm,
Wow, they're there.
why they're there?
That is interesting because when you think about job opportunities, agriculture is almost 20% of our economy.
Food is not a trend. It's not like, no.
I've talked to high school groups, and I've talked, I talk to a lot of people.
Yeah.
When I'm talking to high school students, and because I've seen scholarship applications where they're like, I want to go to college and I want to be an ag teacher, or I want to be a salesman for a chemical company, or, an input supply company, or I want to work at Farm Credit, as a loan officer at a Farm Credit. I try to tell them, I said, okay, agriculture is a huge sector. I said, if you can imagine it, you can find that job in agriculture, just about. And try to broaden their horizons a little bit. I said, you could do what I did. You could work for an association. You could be a communications person. It'd be great if I had somebody that organized meetings, an event planner. You get an event planner working in agriculture, right?
Wow.
Any number of things that you could do besides just either one, being a farmer, or two, working for the few things that they have exposure to when they're in high school.
But here's my question. All those things I would call like, farming adjacent industries and careers go away if anyone actually wants to be a farmer.
I tell people all the time, I said, I'm dependent on that farmer making a crop. That's how my association is funded. It's where a voluntary checkoff on the production. Everybody in the upstream and everybody downstream of that farmer is relying on that farmer for their livelihood. And there's only two places that money can come from in a supply chain like that. One, is the producer.
Yeah.
And the other end of it is all the way at the other end from, because it goes through all the different steps in the supply chain. And the other is the consumer. So those are the two places that you can extract any kind of money out of. So farmers, they buy everything retail, or pretty much. They're not in control of what it costs to buy the inputs that they need. They don't set prices on anything. They don't set price on what they sell. And so, I'm sorry, I got fascinated with what you're doing. I'm like, well, what's he doing over there?
What I'm doing is I'm using a multi-tooth scissor. So that's what this is. And what it's designed to do is not cut every hair. Yeah. And the spacing I'm choosing is so that way I can create a little bit of short hair and long hair. Gotcha. So what happens is if you don't nail that part perfectly, it'll still be blended.
Gotcha.
Sometimes with wavy hair and shorter haircuts, everyone wants it to be, quote, perfect. They want every hair to be exact, right? You throw in humidity in the weather here, that's going to add another mix of how your hair responds to the environment that it's in. Knowing that, since I have curly hair, I understand that hair doesn't behave the same way. I want to throw as many inconsistencies in there so that way
not hard lines.
No hard lines. So that we're going to have a lot more of a blended look. And then as it grows out, it's going to grow out more graceful. Overall, I'm looking for is your shape. I'm not looking for the accuracy of the hair because I know that the hair shape is going to stay. But if this hair gets longer or shorter, it's going to depend on the weather.
Right.
So I'm thinking about multiple things. I'm also thinking about what would happen if you took your cowboy hat off and you put it on and off. How's that going to look if you just happen to run your hands through your hair? So I'm thinking of a few things that we didn't really talk about, but I remember you had that cowboy hat that you put it on when you're on the plane. And I was like, so I know you wear a hat.
Yeah.
So you still have your part there, but see how it's not like that.
Yeah.
You don't have that ridge.
It's not a ridge there.
Exactly. So now, I'm just going through and just trying to smooth out some hard lines. That's all. I've never been to like a cotton farm.
Well, you should come.
Could I?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, do you want to see cotton growing, or do you want to, really the best time is to come when it's being harvested?
When's that?
It'll be in, say around late July, early August. It's hotter than hell. I mean, but everything's air conditioned, so you can get on it.
I just got my air conditioning working in my 65.
Yeah.
So I am happy to go anywhere now in Texas.
No, you need to come down.
I would love to check that out. I would love to check it out and see the whole process. I mean, I've been on ranches that my grandpa and grandma had out in Wyoming, which they didn't want to grow it. They just kind of like, they would sell the semen of bulls to other farm people, and they would breed them and then sell them and all sorts of stuff. So I've been in that equation.
Right.
But I've never really been outside of like a corn maized farm for Halloween.
With any crop, because whenever you're there, it's going to be whatever. It's a point in time. You just get to see it at snapshot of the crop. Then harvest time is always fun because that's kind of the culmination of all the work, and you get to see what it did. And it's a mechanical process. It's kind of complicated and fascinating to watch the machine, take the cotton off the plant. Those machines now, they make they call it a round module. So it takes the cotton and accumulates it and makes it into like a round hay bale. Have you seen that hay bale?
Those big ones I see.
Yeah. So it's essentially the same kind of process, but they do it with cotton, and then it wraps it in plastic and spits it out the back.
Oh, wow. I have a question about, I always see like made with organic cotton. Is that like what's the appeal of organic?
I guess I don't understand the appeal of that, because the fiber you're not consuming it, so.
I'd be more concerned with the processing of the dyes. I would probably want to talk to somebody who farms organic cotton on that one to explain to me, like, why did you do this?
Because I have friends and acquaintances that farm organically, larger scale.
My understanding is the potential long-term effects of some of the pesticides that are using. No, I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah.
My thing was just, do you happen to have organic farmers that have cotton in your association?
I don't have any personally in my association, but because I meet people, I meet people, right?
You know some people.
It's not practical to farm organically in our area because it rains too much. And so weeds grow. Yeah. So where the people that I know farm organically are in the high plains or West Texas, where it's drier, and also where it freezes in the wintertime, because for cotton to harvest it, you have to defoliate it, take the leaves off, and desiccate the plant. And so if you farm cotton organically, you have to wait till it freezes to desiccate the plant and drop the leaves off. And in our area, you may never get a freeze and never get the harvest.
Yeah, right.
And so I don't talk bad about organic producers because they're filling a market niche. If someone has a preference for that,
supply and demand.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm gonna get your eyebrows. There's a few I saw.
Okay,
is that cool?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
I'll be real still.
I remember the first time I did this, I took my buddy's eyebrows right on and off, and he's a chef. He's like, "Good thing I'm in the kitchen." Actually, I'm gonna be filming him this week. Yeah, he is from. Him and I were in our heavy metal band together, where we were in our late teens, early 20s. Band broke up. We were really close. We were playing shows and all that. The band broke up, and he pursued his career in culinary. Ended up becoming an executive chef up in San Francisco for night restaurants and all that. He got sick of it sounded like the commercial side of management, and he's like, I want to get back into the art of cooking. So he abandoned ship, moved to Austin in 2016. And
he's successful here too, I'm sure.
Yeah, he's working at this really cool spot out in Dripping Springs. It's funny because when he was going through culinary school, I was doing my apprenticeship program as a hairdresser, and we both realized if we didn't choose our career paths, we probably would have enjoyed choosing the opposite career.
Y'all could have totally swapped.
Yeah, but I love cooking, and he's like, I think it would have been a pretty good hair. I'm like, I think so too.
Well, I had a real,
You're like,
I had a. No, that's okay. I had a real paradigm shift in the organic stuff.
Really?
We were in DC, and our driver that was going to take us back to the airport, when we got in the car, he was really excited because he asked, "Well, what do y'all do?" And I work for these guys. These are farmers. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm a farmer too. Well, he had bought 10 acres in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And so he said, so he could grow his food organically. And he was talking all about it. The man that was the president of my association at the time had at one time in his career had been an engineer. So he's very analytical. He listened to the conversation a little bit and he goes, he said, I think it's good that small farmers and gardeners like you farm organically. He said, because the chemicals that we use now in crop protection products are so sophisticated. He said that I think if someone like you who didn't know what you were doing could mess it up you could jeopardize our access to these products that we need to farm. He said, so I think it's good that you do it organically. He said, it's fine. I thought that was an interesting observation, is that for gardeners, if you want to garden organically, it's probably safer. Yeah. Well, because to keep from making a mistake with some of and they can't access the things that producers have access to because you have to have a license to buy them and use them and stuff. Right?
Probably quite rigorous to get.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people don't realize just how sophisticated agriculture is and farming is, because these guys, they understand genetics, they understand chemistry, they understand, mechanical engineering. They're smart people.
I was listening to a podcast. It was a Joe Rogan one, and he had this guy from Georgia on, who is regenerative farmer.
Right.
And listening to him talk, first off, his cool Georgian accent was just an amazing storyteller accent. But the things he was talking about and the knowledge he had to have was because he was raising animals. Right. And so you're not just raising animals. You also have to understand the cycling of of harvesting the crops to feed them. And I'm like, man, that's like double or triple the amount of work you have to know just to raise animal. I think he was raising cattle and he had pigs, all that. But the amount of knowledge you have to know, that was the thing I think it was. The required knowledge you have to do it it's mind-boggling. It was a lot.
It's a lot.
It was a lot. And I walked away from listening to that with a lot more respect for that industry. As I was listening to him talk, I was thinking, it was probably about like 6 months after I had sent you that email. And I was like, I bet you Jeff has a lot to talk about this.
Yeah, I asked him in confidence, because I'll the ones that I know that are friends, because I'll tell them, okay, you're going to have to tell me what you spend on this and this, and and a lot of times they don't want to talk about how much they're borrowing or how much. Yeah, but I tell them, I said, look, I'm not going to share your information, but I need to know, kind of at a visceral level, what this is like to be in this business and how much money you're borrowing and how much you got on the line, so that I can relay that information when I'm working on your behalf. I'm very fortunate that I've got a small group of farmers that we're all friends. We've got a group text where we share stuff all the time. They're honest with me. They tell me what they're doing, and so that I understand. And they trust me to keep it in confidence. But it's one of those things that's important for me to know what they've got all on, so I can work for them on that. One thing I want to tell you, because you're the kind of guy that wants to know your farmer, and you know some farmers now, so you get it.
Yeah.
And you've heard the campaign, know your farmer, know your food. And I always tell people, you don't have to know the guy that grew what
I want it to be in my shirt. That's
you don't know. You don't have to, but just if you know a farmer, because I know farmers, and that's why I've got confidence in our food and our production, in our food system in the U.S. is because they're good stewards. They truly care about their land. They may farm conventionally, or however they farm, but they care about the land. They want it to be productive next year. They want to leave it to their future generations, and they're concerned about safety, of their employees and their families. My friend John, when we were in Washington, he said, "Look, I've got a row of cotton, because a field of cotton where my house is." And he said, "I've got a row of cotton that's 8 feet from my house. I farm cotton 8 feet from where I live." He said, "Now, would I do that if I was worried about how I was farming? No. You just need to know a farmer. If you know a farmer, you'll see how invested they are in what they do and how much they care about it. And I think most people would take a lot more comfort in, the food they see at the grocery store, because it's like, they're doing a good job."
I think so. You said it earlier, if we don't have farmers, we don't have food.
What did somebody say? We'd be hungry, sober, and naked, right? That's true. Those are 3 important things for us.
I have young little boys who are young in school system. I'm like, do they do farm visits? I hope that there would be like a little bit of like a merge of like the farming association try to like open up and like bring in younger people to maybe say, you know what, this is actually.
There is some of that goes on because, you know, like I said, my association is small, so the resources we have to devote to that. But some of the bigger organizations like Texas Farm Bureau, they have ag in the classroom where they'll do like a field day where, depending on the county, if your county is participating in that. So they have different ag type displays, and they have actual farmers that'll be there.
Yeah.
And they talk about the things. So that it's always trying to make sure that young people understand where their food comes from. That's not just from, you know, the grocery store, that there's actually somebody has to grow it and produce it, and you know how it gets to where you're at. You might look into that. It's called Ag in the Classroom.
Ag in the classroom. I'll look at it because we were doing.
I think that's what it's called.
We were doing we had a tower. We were growing a lot of like vegetables.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not because of the pandemic, but because we thought it would be great to grow a lot of like basil and parsley and all those things that grow very quickly that you use in a lot of food.
Right.
And it was really cool to see the interest in my kids in the growing process.
Yeah. It's fun, right?
They love it. We plant it, and then they go check on it every day, and then they'd see it, and they'd be like, Mama, Dada, look, it's growing. And the mint, they would eat the mint raw. And it was just seeing how my kids were so excited about that.
Right.
I could only imagine the excitement more kids would have on a much larger scale.
Yeah.
The one thing that hairdressing has opened for me is it's put a lot of different people in my path that my social circles would not normally encounter.
Right.
The fact is that when people sit in my chair, it opens my eyes to different things, different viewpoints, different industries. And I feel I'm a more informed individual because of the conversations I get to have with people in the chair.
Yeah.
I'm able to ask all the questions, even the dumb ones.
It helps that you're a curious person, right? So
I wish there was more curiosity with people, but since people aren't curious, and maybe they're only curious about clicking like on a podcast or something like that because of the clickbait, I look at like, if I could bring some of my curiosity of the conversation I've had that really, I think, you know, made me more of a well-rounded, open-minded individual. I'm hoping that like I can give that same exposure and open-mindedness and well-roundedness to my kids. And I just hope that somebody's watching this, they're like, you know what? Maybe I had a different view of what farmers really go through. Farming is a tough one. Yeah. It's tough, and it's the one industry I think that we absolutely need. As you said, it's so great. Without farmers, what are we left with?
Hungry, sober, and naked.
Exactly.
Some people might like the naked part, but the hungry and sober part is not going to be fun, right?
Yeah, 1/3 of that is the burning now.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's not the hungry and sober part.
That's right.
Real quick, Jeff, how's your hair?
It looks good.
Is it feel summer short for you?
It does.
Do you feel like you can go into DC and the Capitol and still look respectable?
I do.
Good. Good job, son, man.
Well, you do. I knew you were going to do a good job. So,
you know what? I appreciate your confidence in me.
And my fallback was hat.
You know what? On that note, we're done.
No, it was good.
Thank you. If you want to find out more about farming, or can people get involved with you? Can citizens like me get involved and help farmers in any way?
If you want to follow my association on Facebook, it's at South Texas Cotton Grain.
All right, dude.
Enjoyed it. I really did.
Cool.
I knew I would. I thought, because you're kind of an intriguing guy. So
I think you're intriguing. I got off that flight with my wife, and like, I had the most amazing cars. This guy was really cool. She's like, ooh, what's he doing? So I'm like, he represents farmers. I think she was just so caught off. She's like, farmers. I'm like, oh,
that doesn't sound interesting.
Me, it does.
Yeah.
Like I said, I have a little bit of knowledge about farming to make me dangerous with some of the questions that I may want to ask. I don't want to get too crazy because I don't want to create divisive viewpoints. I really want to create I want to create curiosity with this conversation for people.
Right.
I did not know that Texas is like the largest state for growing cotton.
Yeah.
And we kind of need cotton if you want to.
Well, yes, if you want to wear something natural and
yeah, trust me. It's the only two things I like to have.
If you're coming from California to here, you realize the humidity heat, humidity, cotton's your friend, right?
The cotton's been my friend for a long time.
Yeah,
It's just the most comfortable.
that's right.
So awesome. Well, Sandy, I'm gonna turn this off.
Okay.